The most versatile, explosive action hero around.
Yeah, that's a tough question.
Badass.
I mean, he isn't really a good guy, is he?
We are focusing a little bit more on Rico this time around to show him his personality that's sort of been hidden in the first two games. Rico is really a guy who can be super evil and a not very pleasant person, and he can be a really nice guy, but that's all up to the player.
I want to say he's a badass, angry, crazy, anti-hero-ish sort of, but he wants to do the right thing, but he has crazy ways of doing it. And so for us in this project specifically, Rico is the savior coming back to retake his home.
We took Rico from where he was, and we wanted to do a progression of the story. What would Rico do that would be after what happened at Panau? And so we kind of brought him home.
In the first game, he was more of a mumbling idiot, and we did that deliberately, actually. We did want to tone down his persona and let the world be the character, and that's sort of been the character of the Just Cause games until now.
He's gotten older. He's, got his scars from all his years in Panau and San Espirito, and we wanted to give him that background. What would it be like if you were a person who had set off a nuke twice? Seems a pretty intense thing for a single person to have done, freeing a nation from a dictator. That's our core development within Rico, is to give him that real grounding. We looked at Rico, obviously we did all the graphic stuff that we wanted to do. We improved the amount of triangles that we use for him, the number of poly counts, and updated everything from his hair to his beard to his outfit, and all the little things that we can animate on him. We probably have over 2,500 animations now for a single character, but he's a complex character. He can do anything, anytime, and we wanted to ensure that responsiveness was still a part of that. I pull the trigger, I'm always shooting, no matter what state I'm in. What it means is you get this perfectly fluid experience through the world.
We definitely wanted to bring a sense of groundedness and physicality to Rico. We wanted to give him real weight in what he was doing in terms of the animation tech that we developed, and also the animations. And we're using real motion capture now, which was really a big step up in terms of the projects. But what we didn't want to lose was the responsiveness. We didn't want to lose his ability to do things quickly, move quickly. And so it was a big challenge to try to use really high fidelity animation and motion capture, but still kind of keep it true to the responsiveness that the fans really care about.
The first thing that we did was we took a look at Just Cause 2, saw what was really strong, the grappling, the parachute, all that type of stuff, retain what was really cool and core about them, and then tried to figure out, okay, where are our holes now, right? And what we determined is that the wingsuit was a great opportunity for us, right? There's about 1 million different ways that you could do a wingsuit in a game, but what we had to figure out is how do we get that working really well with the existing mechanics that we have?
Just like you could slingshot your way through the world with the grappling hook and the parachute in JC2, you can still use the grappling hook while you're in the wingsuit. So this is a more fast-paced state for Rico. You can use your grapple to grapple anything in the world, change your direction, go underneath tunnels, between buses, pretty much anything.
I'm not sure there's a crisp verbal explanation of why it's so great to use the wingsuit, but it's one of those things where I think once you hold it in your hands and you kind of have this mental mapping of, oh, it's generally going forward, and being able to mix that together, kind of creating velocity and being able to use those velocities to create a parachute that has a nice little sequence, all that stuff just works really nicely together. That was just a bunch of hundreds of iterations on the wingsuit and parachute and all that stuff together.
The parachute now allows us to shoot every weapon, transition out of it, reel back in out of it, but gives Rico a whole nother tool set for combat. The game gets easier when you do crazier things. We upgraded his grapple hook, so the grapple hook looks cool and sleek and has a bit more of a modern feel to it.
We also have some cool stuff for the dual tether, right, with the grappling hook where you get to kind of tether things together. First, we took a lot of inspiration from the modding community. We let you have more tethers, and it turns out they're absolutely right, like they usually are. and it is more fun to be able to have more than one tether.
One of the things we wanted to make sure was moving around the world in a very vertical world in this playground had to be amusing. And a lot of games do an open world, but then it can be a little tedious, and after a while you just start jumping around using fast travel. We wanted to try to create an experience where just moving to the other position was fun. That piece of picking up a controller and just having an enormous amount of fun is why we're all in this business to start with.
There's a million ways to play the game in terms of blowing stuff up, meaning you can kind of not be looking to do it, but you see something that you want to blow up and you're driving along really fast, you aim the car at it and you bail, and there it is. So kind of everything's a weapon. And then there's also weapons.
For me, it was always about like, how ridiculous can I go? So I build something kind of big and I'm like, a little more. I'm like, okay. So I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna just dial this up to like 30 and see what happens on a 10 scale. And like, perfect. I'm like, yeah, okay, well, let's see if we can maintain that for the whole game. And we have, so that's awesome.
You know, we're a part of a section of games that have been focused on next gen since the beginning. And this allows us to do things that maybe the crossover titles weren't able to do up front.
I mean, games like Uncharted is obviously amazing in how they script these sequences, but it's of course entirely pre-designed and canned. We try to avoid canned experience as much as possible, so it's all based on cause and effect.
The world feels more reactive to what you do. It's not just one explosion. You get this shockwave, you get signs falling, you get people running away, you get kind of things burning, and it feels more alive.
We noticed early on that when things blew up, the little pieces would fly just into the stratosphere, and so we changed to a pressure-based explosion algorithm. So now when things explode, it's kind of more like a real explosion, and things follow a shockwave outwards. So you get more of this kind of debris sort of spraying, and frequently some of the larger bits you can then interact with afterwards, use those pieces to, you know, sort of dual tether them into other things, and you know, it's a playground.
That seems to be one of the big challenges that we face. Isn't even so much how do you blow something up. It's easy to blow something up. It's what happens when you blow it up and why it blows up. And if you have something that's moving very fast and colliding with the surface, does it blow up under those circumstances? And we have to figure out, how and when and why. Because if you're working on a school bus and you have to think about what if that school bus was in the air flying into a mountain? What would that? Because we have to think about that, because it's that kind of game.
I think one of the more spectacular things is newest is the bridge that's fully destructible.
My job is to figure out sort of what we can do feasibly. In most cases, depending on where you sort of place these explosives or how you explode it, different pieces will sort of activate and come off. Like if I decide that I'm going to blow up the middle part, then the two sides, sometimes one of them doesn't always fall. It'll just sort of sit there and hang. You'll see cars kind of like, driving off the edge.
The vision for it was more taken from movies, so we wanted it to be a bit more spectacular.
One of the challenges that we've run into, which is an interesting challenge to have, is making too much stuff too awesome. We have to take some things and be like, all right, well, so when you kick this can, it's not going to be an atom explosion. It's going to, it's just going to maybe a small gas bomb fireball, and then.
Well, we have done a few things that make no sense, but it's okay.
But that's true. Yeah, there is some of that. Yeah.
So.
Sure, it's not the most realistic thing in the world, but sometimes realism can be left for reality. And when I'm playing a game, I want to sometimes be surreal. And the game Just Cause is kind of about that. It's a guy with a grapple hook on his arm that can do it without it detaching his arm from his body.
Doing it too realistically would perhaps be a bit dull, so we tried to amp it up just a bit.
The vehicle team really came up with an idea to change the way destruction works.
We spent more time on the fidelity of vehicle destruction.
Instead of just doing deformation, which is really cool, they actually added things like hinged parts on it. So you actually get the side view mirror hanging off the side. It seems like a small detail, but when you're driving around and smashing into a wall, you actually get that amazing return of, it gives life to the vehicle. For the most part, our game is about movement and that traversal space, so the destruction is a joyful response, a reactivity in the world. It's huge.
I would like to say that it's still one of the biggest in the industry, yeah.
A lot of people, size is just kind of the beginning.
How big? Oh, I should know.
It goes by departments, right?
It used to be a point where we were way bigger than everybody else. I think people have been expanding their worlds quite a lot, and it's been really impressive. I mean, there's some amazing games out there. But I think we still have one of the biggest maps ever. It's up there. But we started off thinking about what the gameplay was, who Rico was.
Because Rico is torn in his heart in terms of seeing this rupture of the land, the same thing happens in the landscape. The trees are gnarled, the rocks are shattered, the towns are old, so everything is all in a state of disjointedness and a state of ruin.
And we wanted to create an environment that was very vertical, that allowed for navigation in a way that got Rico quickly into the air. So we thought about what places in the world have cliffs that are 100 meters tall. Well, what places in the world have crystal clear waters? The south of France and Greece and Spain, Corsica, Malta.
The map is really big. Like, I'll probably have to upgrade my computer just to work on the map.
And in the beginning, it's just almost like a gray blob. Get some characters and landscapes in, and taking the the most amazing parts of the northern Italy and Corsica and other places.
There are 3 regions in the game, and basically region 1 is a medley of wealthy and poor towns. It also has the most agriculture. In region 2 is more of these military bases and very poor fishing towns, some classical ruins, a lot of rebel bases that are hidden. And in region 3, which is my favorite region, is the more forested, more rocky region in the north. It's more, it's sort of our Game of Thrones region. It's a huge wall that sort of divides the country. One way to add depth to our world is the idea of depth in history. And so what Rico is doing is he's adding yet one more set of ruins to the long list of ruins. And so you see the ancient past, the near past, the present, and what's the future. Just Cause is about changing regime. And so how to make a regime that feels believable in the Mediterranean in this contemporary day and age. The classic tropes of regime versus the will of the people is through graffiti and dissent, is through architecture, is through color. It's not gang graffiti, it's graffiti by people who don't know graffiti. It's something that's very sincere and very from the heart by the people.
We're looking for a place that's lost hope. A lot of people have been run down by Di Ravello. You could see it in like the environments for the villages, like it's just like completely destroyed, but you still have to have that beauty at the same time, like having that brutalism versus like this Renaissance kind of appearance.
In the militarized zones, we have more freedom of the classic just cause gameplay, whereas in the civilian settlements we want to keep it somewhat different and really emphasize on the people living there.
At the core of Just Cause is verticality, vertical combat and vertical traversal. Having the world being the Mediterranean allow for an architecture and a topology which really goes hand in hand with verticality. Imagine sheer cliffs, high mountains, big elevation differences.
One of our mottos is, if you can see it, you can go there. One of the unique features of the Just Cause series is the draw distance and the ability to actually see the entire world. And there's no better way to present that than from above, obviously. So we want Rico to be airborne as much as possible, either from free falling or parachuting or in an airplane or whatever.
There is no game where you will feel as comfortable by traversing the skies and fighting while you are in air as in Just Cause.
We needed a world that we could sculpt. This required an entirely new invention of technology to recreate entirely how we were going to do worlds.
We have the best job in the world, essentially, making video games. I like JC4's huge openness as well. I just like to steal a helicopter and go crazy.
We have taken inspiration from some of the mods that were produced for Just Cause 2 for some of the more crazy ideas that we've put into Just Cause 3.
The modding community took, and it's a complex piece of code. So the fact that people were able to get in there and do what they've been able to do is really cool. I mean, watching a lot of the mods, I mean, the famous ones, the Superman mods, the Infinite Grapple mods, you know, the multiplayer guys coming out and trying to figure out how to run the game on a server. All that's an incredible thing to do as modding. And some of these guys worked on mods for years to get them to work. And that sort of dedication to a game, you have a responsibility to put out a game that allows them to do it again. And so I kind of can't wait to see what people do now that we've expanded the tool set so much.
I want to make a Just Cause with a long tail, as long, if not longer, than the one that Just Cause 2 had. I want to make a Just Cause that not only player will enjoy playing, but player will enjoy modifying and creating new stuff on top of it.
I think it would be a mistake if we tried to do a story that was very serious. It's a game where you mess around and do crazy stuff. So to match that, you need a crazy story that couldn't take itself too seriously because it just wouldn't fit.
Some of a critique that we had in Just Cause 2 was about the story itself. And we've been really attentive this time to give a depth to Rico for the player who wanted.
So Rico arrives in Medici, which is the country that he grew up in. It's where he learned to parachute and to base jump and to swim and to do all the things that made him a reckless action hero. One night, a coup happened and Di Ravello took power. On that night, his parents were killed and he had to escape from the island. In his escape, he met Sheldon and he was kind of recruited into the agency.
I think the biggest difference in terms of tone is that you're not working anymore for the agency, right?
No, he is now that one-man army, a one-man revolutionary force. He comes back because he gets a letter from his oldest friend saying, hey, Rico, you know, it's been fun, but, you know, we kind of lost. And Mario knows what a great action hero Rico is, and suddenly the tides start turning, and people start joining the rebellion, allowing eventually the exiled leader who was pushed out all those many years ago during the coup to come back and start rebuilding a democratic state.
The first main character that you meet is a character named Mario, and he is in some ways a little bit of a comic relief character. Maybe he thinks he's a little bit more important to this rebel uprising than he actually is.
We introduced Di Ravello as soon as possible, and we're trying to build basically a rivalry, almost a one-on-one rivalry with the player and Di Ravello throughout it.
The story involves a super element that the evil dictator uses to build these super weapons.
But he is still that omniscient supervillain off in the distance, intent on world power. And of course, the ultimate outcome is a confrontation with Di Ravello.
The discovery of this Bavarium, which was sort of accidentally leaked to him from Dima, Rico's friend, the scientist, caused him to raise his goals even higher.
You know, something that is highly destructive and magnetic. It's just an awesome material. The next level of uranium, if you will. We hope that the characters are enough fun that you don't mind the 30-second cutscene that's introducing what absurd mission you're about to go on. At first we were going to just do regular motion capture and do our VO in it, but to try to improve the quality a little bit, we ended up using full performance capture. So we capture the facial animation with the actors in full suits, including their voice. What this does is you get a little of the gesticulation that we all do, and it ties with how they're emoting within their voice. It's a subtle difference, but I think it improves quality quite a lot. The second piece to it is that we could actually have a cameraman, and what's funny, he's not really holding a camera, he's actually holding a little flat screen with dots on it, and when he looks through the flat screen, he sees the game world. So you're actually able to capture the world. This really helped quite a lot in bringing life to our short cinematics.
From the beginning, we know that, yeah, this is our mechanics, and we prototype them really early, so we kind of know exactly how they're going to work, so we can kind of be building missions around that.
I would say from a gameplay perspective, our missions are excuses to let you try cool things and do cool things. And we've kept there the same philosophy, which is all over the place in the rest of the game, which means leave the player free to experiment and reach his goals the way he prefers.
There's between 20 and 30 missions right now, and JC2 I think was like 6 missions or something, so it's a lot bigger than that. The challenges are, they can almost be thought of as mini missions, but with the big difference being that they're repeatable and they have leaderboards, so they're the kind of things that we encourage players to play again and again and try to get better and better scores in. A lot of times we'll put a challenge start that's right next to where the mission ends. Many of the missions involve rebels involved in combat that Rico is also involved in. Like for example, in the civilian settlements that you're liberating, you can, there's police stations in most of the towns. The idea is to cause havoc in the police station by blowing stuff up and wrecking everything. And rebels will start coming in to assist you. And they have fully fleshed AI involved in this faction versus faction combat, so you can, to some extent, leave them there and let them continue to take care of the police station while you're going to, say, rip down a statue or do whatever else you want to do in the town.
We're trying to build such a systemic AI as possible, and what I mean by that is that basically they can handle kind of all situations. We create a response, so if they hear a gunshot at any point, they should kind of react in a systemic way to that. So if they see a military or the military sees them, they're gonna start fighting each other, and so it's having a balance so that should happen, but it shouldn't turn into like World War III inside of a town.
You know, these people live in this world and they want this revolution to succeed. And it's not just about destroying everything and walking away. Because Rico has an attachment to this world, he wants to go further than just destroying, so that he doesn't leave it in just total fire and chaos at the end.
The Avalanche engine focuses a lot on rule sets and procedural solutions to problems. The benefit of that is the freedom of movement that enables for the player.
The way they're advancing the engine adds for a sort of order of magnitude increase in the type of things you can do.
Well, one of the great features was while you're in the wingsuit, you could use the grappling hook at the same time. So for us, a lot of that complexity comes from just the natural layering of our mechanics together.
I think the biggest thing that the player will see is being able to have the freedom to do many things while still kind of just playing.
One of the more frustrating moments in games is you have this awesome idea in your head and you just hit the button and you say, the awesome idea should have happened right there. But the game is in the middle of an animation, or it's decided that you should be doing something else. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of technology, trying to get that feeling where no matter what button you pressed, it would respond in the way you thought it should respond. I mean, we have a ton of new memory. We're able to, the processing power, the parallel structures that are in place now, it allows for things that you couldn't do on last gen.
So we've started using Havoc destruction, which is a kind of extension for the Havoc physics that deals with things breaking apart. And we've been one of the kind of early adopters for their latest iteration of that system.
Think just about, for example, what we call the chaos objects. So those are the things that you destroy to liberate a military base. In Just Cause 2, the technique which was used, it's called mesh swapping. So you deal a certain amount of damage, and then a bit of illusionism, and you swap what you see for another visual. Now everything is procedural, meaning that each one of these objects is composed by sub-objects, and then they are attached together as they would be in real world. So what we use now, it's an AI system based on behavior trees rather than on goal-oriented behavior. It means that our designers are much more in control of what the AI actually does.
The designers have set up ways to find firing lines when you're in the air. It seems pretty simple as a human, but if you imagine what that calculation is, the math behind it of someone actually having to find all the certain things that have to go through these behavior trees so that the AI is making the right decision.
Just the ability to create worlds of this density, complexity, and size, that alone is something that makes the Avalanche engine stand out in front of many other engines.